Hello. This is the beginning of part two of our discussion of literacy strategies in the social studies classroom. So we talked in the first part about the first 5 on our list of 10, and now we will talk about the last 5. The number 6 on the list then is that you should be teaching reading fix-it strategies, and this comes from an English teacher down in Anaheim. His name's Kelly Gallagher. I guess he's a little bit more than an English teacher now. He has 3 or 4 books, and he makes presentations all the time. I think I've heard him speak 5 or 6 times, and it's always interesting. A funny thing is, I've heard one of his speeches, one of his presentations, a day-long presentation. I think I've heard it 4 times, the same exact presentation. And with most people, you would say that's awful. But he has such interesting ideas that he's worth looking into. It's not theory. It's not sort of what George Hillocks might be doing, but it is super practical stuff. And you always come away from a Kelly Gallagher speech thinking, oh my gosh, I want to put that into practice like right now. So I would get his book Reading Reasons. I think it's the best one of his books. It's also the only one I've read. So. It's the very best of all of the ones that I've read. So basically, what Kelly Gallagher says is that you need to be teaching reading fix-it strategies to your students, and that's important. The principal strategy, he says, practiced by good readers is rereading, and our students have incredible difficulty with rereading. Good readers, as they're reading something, they can live with ambiguity. They can see this line, this opening line from 1984. It was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. Well, if you're a really literal reader, then you might read that and just say, "Wait a minute, I'm going to need to stop trying to understand this piece because, well, he just said the clock struck 13." Good readers will simply live with that ambiguity and move on, and good readers know when to move on and when not. So what we need to do is not hide the hard work of reading from our students. And the best way to teach fix-it strategies is show them how you fix your own writing. Put some difficult text on the board and deal with it. Now you do this all the time on your own, and you may not even know how you do this. If you're reading a book, you might stop and reread a word. You might look it up. You might not. And in fact, that in itself, students should be able to see. I don't know what that means, and I don't really care what that means. I'm moving on. The only way you can teach students that is by showing them, by modeling that for them. So put some difficult text on the board and have at it. There's a great little piece from Carl Sagan that you could show them that has historical implications. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena with billions and billions of stars. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and in triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Now, we're not going to read through this whole thing, but this has historical implications, what he's talking about here. He is basically saying that, and here he is, isn't he? Isn't he great? Carl Sagan. He's basically talking about the fact that these historical rulers, these generals and these emperors, are looking for glory and triumph on a stage that is so incredibly meaningless that it is just one simple little dot in a vast expanse of what he says is the cosmic arena. Now, here's what you would do then with this text. You'd put this on the board. You'd have the students just listen, and you'd say, "Okay, I'm going to read this with you, but I'm going to tell you what I'm thinking while I'm reading it." So you show the students that you actually have to do hard work to read a difficult text. It's not that difficult that you couldn't understand it on the first read, but it's difficult at a good level because you're not going to immediately turn students off. So the Earth is a very small stage. You might just stop there. A small stage, what does he mean by that? Well, all right, I'm thinking about Shakespeare, right? Isn't there that line from Shakespeare? And you just tell the students, I just have this freaky kind of internal dialogue on the outside. Just let it out. So there's this line from Shakespeare, all the world is a stage. All right. So I think I get that. In a vast cosmic arena. So maybe he's talking about the planets and the universe. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors. Rivers of blood. How do we get to rivers of blood so quickly? And why is it being spilled? That's pretty scary. All right. By all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph. Basically, you just move through the whole thing and show them you're stopping, and then you go back. You could even get down to the very end and say, to me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly and compassionately with one another, and to preserve and cherish that pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. And then you could go back and say, pale blue dot, wait a minute, how many times has he said dot here? And show them that good readers don't just move this way. Good readers move like this. Whoa, whoa, wait a minute. And then pale blue dot, wait a minute, dot. And so you're moving all over the page. You're done with the whole thing, and then you go back to the beginning. Now, you may not read every text like this. You may not go through a novel like this because you'd never get through it. But difficult text is what they are dealing with, especially if you're looking at the expository text that we're giving them. They're difficult text, and you need to give them some framework for how to fix their reading in those difficult texts, how to revise their reading, how to stop, how to rethink it, and move forward. Kelly Gallagher also offers the following advice: these 7 commandments of building successful young writers. 7 commandments of building successful young writers. The only one that I would linger on a bit, and because you will have these, but the only one I would think about is, the 2 I would think about is the conference one. Try to make their reading and writing experience as one-on-one as possible. Meet with your students individually. Have a day when the students know, okay, we're working on this project, and he's calling every single person in this classroom, or she's going to meet with every single person during this week, and here's your given time. Everybody else is reading or working on something else. Then commandment number 3 says, don't focus solely on editing issues. There's something that I see occasionally when I look at other people's graded papers. When you look, especially in history, I think history teachers are a little uncertain about themselves, and so they feel like they have the need to mark every problem on a page. There is ample research now to show if you mark every problem on a student's page, the students learn 0. They take nothing from it. Or if they're really good students, they'll do what you should have done in the first place. They'll focus on one area and only look at that. So let's say you mark a possessive apostrophe problem that they have, and then on the page also you have all sorts of subject-verb agreements, you have arrows going here, you have so much writing on the page that all they see is your writing. You've written as much on the page as they have. There are people here in English and history who do this all the time, and it's an absolute disservice. And it's not only a disservice, it's actually counterproductive. It stops students from doing exactly what we want students to do. What do we want them to do? Revise your writing. Work on the problems in your writing. Make it more thoughtful, make it more creative, make it less formulaic and boring, make it something that we want to read. Well, then we have a responsibility in that, don't we? Our responsibility is to push in the right way, to push the students in the right way. The way you do that is by focusing your comments. And students won't come back to you and say, yes, but I must not have comma problems because look at this earlier draft from September where you didn't mark comma problems. And you can say to them when they do that, if they do that, that'd be kind of a joy if they're so awake that they're doing that. If they do that, you simply say, no, I wasn't focused on comma problems then. Do you want me to mark the commas on that one? Let's go. But you have advanced so much, heavenly, wonderful student, that now we're able to actually talk about commas in your history writing. That's amazing. Basically, you shouldn't be dealing with a lot of editing issues. Other research, so research is very clear about this. You fill the page with comments, they learn nothing. You've got to focus your comments. You focus on what you want to focus on. If you're not clear about that, then you should rethink your assignment or ask me for the research, and I'll fill you up with it. There's plenty of work done in this area now, and so focus your comments. Basically, you should also be avoiding editing comments at all. Maybe not at all. a great deal of editing that goes on is counterproductive. A great deal of the sort of marking of subject-verb agreement is counterproductive. And I've done my own studies that have shown you can do much more sort of creative work to push a student to write better than if you just mark the problems and assume they'll go away. If you mark problems and assume they'll go away, they will not go away. And in fact, you'll entrench them even further. If you let students edit other people's writing, let them mark the fragments and the commas and the run-ons and all that business, the problem will get worse for the student doing the revising and for the student who thinks his or her paper is being revised, but it's actually being screwed over. So don't even mess with that. Your revision in class should focus on the idea of the paper, the layout of the thing, the way sentences are placed together. It should not focus on these editing issues. That will only make their writing worse. Then, another way to make their writing better is to use this fabulous Talmudic technique from Bob Probst. There's a writing exercise. I've used it many times. You take a short piece of text, you put it in the middle of a paper, you put that on a poster or whatever, put that on the wall, then you have students just wander around the room and start writing on that. Now, unlike most of what happens in your classrooms, in this one you can't have people talking. Because what happens is if the students talk about what's on the page, or they talk at all, then they don't write. So in this one, unlike most of what we want happening in your classrooms, there should be basically silence as the students wander around, write comments on text, ask questions, answer the questions. What you end up with, it looks a little bit like it's fabulous. It looks like a holy mess. But at some point, you can interrupt the process and say something like, okay, now wherever you are, look at the paper in front of you and disagree with something on the paper. You can disagree with the quote. You can disagree with a comment. There might be a question there. Disagree with a question. Whatever you want. Disagree with it. Also, on the writing rule, you should know that it's going to be violated. So on the no speaking rule. So the only real rule with this one is they take the text, they walk around the class, and they respond to the text on the wall. As they're responding, after 10 minutes or so, they'll start to talk, and that's good. So you've created a rule in your class, and then you're wanting them to break it. And but you want to get them started with expressing themselves on paper first. And if you want to talk about classroom management and how you shouldn't have rules that they're going to break, then that's fine. But don't talk to me about it because I have no further comment. Okay. So this writing exercise is a great one. Then another thing you can have them do, and this would be number 8 on our list, would be to encourage media literacy. If you go to the Center for Media Literacy at www.medialit.org, they've got the 5 key questions of media literacy. So thinking about media, thinking about ads, or thinking about movies or television shows or whatever it is, just have your students go through some of these questions with some of the media you're looking at. Who created this message? What creative techniques are being used to attract my attention? That's a good one. That's a scary one too, right? How might different people understand this message differently than me? What values, lifestyles, and points of view are represented or omitted from the message? And why is this message being sent? If you could get them to ask this of every Google ad, that would be fabulous. Of every TV show they're watching, of every advertisement in a magazine that they watch, what does this ad value? Who does it leave out? What lifestyle does it privilege? If you help students have these critical interactions with film, I think that you are helping them out in the extracurricular world. And then think about using those questions with historical films. Think about which historical films might work in your classroom. Would it be Germinal or Matawan, if you want to look into mining? 2 fabulous movies on mining. 8 Men Out for baseball. Glory for the Civil War. All the President's Men for Watergate. what I think is increasingly true in terms of the way you structure your classrooms is that critical engagement with film can encourage students to become narrating subjects of their education rather than listening subjects of their education. You can see where that comes from. So when they become narrating subjects, they are actually determining what's happening in their education, and that's what we want. We want them to be determining the sort of the nature of their education. We want them to be focused on creating these educational moments, and I think the use of media literacy is a fabulous time to do that. We've got two more themes. They're kind of both. I don't know, one's an idea, and one is another really practical one. So the first one, really practical, is one of the findings of this Writing to Read report created by the state from, I think, 2011. Massive report. All the CSUs were involved. It's a huge report. But one of their findings is we need to be much more focused on doing short writings that are summaries. You can do short summary writing and really build a student's ability to work with text. And those skills will transfer. One way to do that is with what's called a rhetorical précis. And so the rhetorical précis is basically a useful tool that you can try to ensure that you're engaged with text. It seems overly structured. It almost feels like a sort of Jane Schaefer experiment where they're looking very specifically at the type of sentence that goes first, the type of sentence that goes second. It feels formulaic, and much of history writing is overly formulaic as it is, so we want to avoid that, and normally we would not want to privilege that. But in this case, there's some worth in privileging that. There's some beauty in the formula in that it produces a good little summary. So the summary, what it says is, it's a 4-sentence paragraph that records the essential elements of an essay. Sounds kind of boring, but that's only because it is kind of boring. But there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. So in the first sentence, because you're teaching them the structure of building a little summary, in the first sentence, you name the author, you use a rhetorically accurate verb, and then you say what their background is and who they are. The second sentence, you're explaining the evidence, so you have a how sentence. So you have a what sentence, a how sentence, a why sentence, and a who sentence. You can see this on the thing that I sent you, but a rhetorical précis, I think, is a good way to give students a good, experience of summary and give them something that they can really latch on to. A lot of times they don't know what to expect from us. It's not like in math where they might have a workbook with a certain number of chapters and they know exactly what questions they're going to be answering, and they might not understand the math a lot of times, but they definitely know sort of where they're going because they've got formulas for it. Well, we kind of lack that in history a lot of times. I think the rhetorical précis might be one very small strategy that you could use that could help your classroom. Then the final recommendation is to build a library in your classroom. Build a library in your classroom. Most school libraries now are shameful places, shameful and old, dusty places, and so you should use your classroom as this also is something that Kelly Gallagher talks about at great length, and he's done great things at his school in Anaheim to bring students in for book clubs, to bring teachers in for book clubs. Another fabulous idea if you could have a reading club with your fellow teachers. But build a library in your classroom for students also. We have some selections here, things like Oh Yuck, which is fabulous, or Oh Yikes is the fabulous one. Oh Yuck is pretty disgusting. The work of Jerry Stanley, who is my mentor. So he wrote this book, I'm an American. His most famous one is this one, Children of the Dust Bowl. Especially if you're teaching in the Valley, you should just have that book. Please Bury Me in the Library is a great book. It's poetry, but it's good. Phineas Gage, I think I've told you about Phineas Gage, which is a story of brain science, and you can see his his skull there. And then this last one is Tales of the Cryptids, mysterious creatures that may or may not exist. I mean, if you have this sort of thing in your room, your students are going to gravitate toward them. They're going to want to get them. Maybe not so much if you have Kathy Davidson's Revolution and the Word, The Rise of the Novel in America. You can build your own library in your classroom. There's nothing wrong with that. But build a library of books that students want to go out and read. And then I don't care if you loan them out or not. A lot of them you'll probably never see again. So maybe that's problematic. But build your class as a place where students are reading. They're having numerous interactions with texts. They see your classroom as a place that for however long they're in there, they are having valuable experiences with interesting texts, so that they are critically engaging on a daily basis with ideas in a format that is pushing historical thinking, but it's also pushing literacy. You're pushing them to interact with texts, to wonder about texts, to rethink what texts are doing, so that what we end up with is a much better educated student. I think that they'll do better on the tests if you do this, but the more important thing is you'll have more fun with them. They'll have a better experience of school and more fun in the classroom, and then they'll want to go off and read more and become reading individuals. That is something that will build their future. It not only gives them those imaginative rehearsals that Kenneth Burke talks about when they as readers, but it allows them to sort of rethink who they are. I think it's Billy Owens also who says we read ourselves away from ourselves. So the people who don't read are incredibly sort of locked within themselves, and we want students to move away from themselves and then go back to themselves at some point. I don't know, but it's important that they have these experiences with texts, with a great deal of writing styles, and that you are there giving them not always positive, but giving them the type of feedback that makes them want to write more, rather than the type of feedback that makes them do what most feedback does, which is makes them want to never write anything again. And how dare we write something that has that effect on someone's paper? So make sure you can be negative, and you can challenge the students to write better sentences and to write more thoughtful pieces, but give them so many opportunities that's just one part of what you're writing to them, that you're also giving them feedback that's positive and filling them with these fabulous text opportunities. If you have any questions, you can email me. You know where to find me. I'll see all of you soon enough. But by all means, enjoy. And